What's up everyone, my name is Nigel, and in today's video I wanted to talk about B cameras or secondary cameras or backup cameras. So I want to talk a little bit about why you might need a B camera or secondary camera body. Some of the cameras that I've used as B cameras in the past, including the one that I most recently bought. And also I want to give you some suggestions on second cameras for you depending on what camera you currently own. So let's talk a little bit about B cameras and why you might need them. So typically I only use one camera. I use my Panasonic GH3 for 95% of my shooting, especially for my stuff here on YouTube. But there are certain occasions where I need to get a shot of my camera. So how do I do that? And that's where a secondary camera or a B camera kind of comes in handy. So yeah, for the most part, I've just used one Panasonic GH3. But in the occasion where I do need to get a shot of my camera, or I just need two cameras for a certain reason, here on YouTube, I will typically use my iPhone as my B camera. I've used the original Canon G7X that I actually borrowed from a buddy. And pretty recently I had the Panasonic GX7, which was a great camera, but it had some limitations in it and it just wasn't that easy to shoot with. And so those are some of the cameras that I've used as a B camera. And to be honest, I think that for most of us, we could probably just use our phones as our B camera whenever we need to pick up a quick little shot of something on the camera that we're talking about. But there are definitely some situations where you just need two cameras. When I shot weddings, it was almost imperative to have two cameras. Typically when I would shoot a wedding, I would rent a second camera. So if I was using a Panasonic GH3, I would typically rent a Panasonic FZ1000, which is like one of their super zooms. And I would just use that as my down the aisle shot. And I would just rent it for a weekend and return it, and then I save myself a bunch of money because I didn't have to actually go out and buy one. I can just spend, $70 and rent it for a few days. But with how cheap GH3s are now, it doesn't really make sense to rent another one. It's way cheaper just to go out and buy one. Which brings me to the B camera that I currently have, which is another Panasonic GH3. So if you follow me on Instagram, you'll know that I posted that I just bought another Panasonic GH3. These cameras are just so cheap that it just made a lot of sense for me to just go and pick up another one, because I could definitely use two cameras when I'm shooting my YouTube videos, especially when I'm trying to show you anything on the camera that I'm currently shooting on. And what's really nice about having two cameras that are exactly the same is that the images are going to look exactly the same as the images coming out of this camera because they're the exact same camera. I got this camera for under $300 and it's basically brand new. So I'm using this as my B-roll camera, and all those shots that you saw in the beginning of this video were shot with another Panasonic GH3 with this little cheap 25mm f1.7. All right, so whenever I get a new camera or even a used camera that's in as good a condition as this camera's in, I always like to cover up the areas that normally get scratched on my cameras with some gaff tape. That way, whenever I go to sell it, all of my gear will look like it's in really mint condition. So little pro tip, if you're planning on selling your stuff, which eventually I probably am going to sell my GH3s, but until then, they're going to be wrapped with gaff tape. Now this should extend the life of this little GH3 and hopefully keep it from getting any scratches from the quick release plate, or anytime I rig it, the top here where the flash is won't get scratched up. And something that I've learned is that if you can afford it, it definitely makes sense to get two of the exact same camera bodies, because then you know that the colors and the codec and the files coming out of both cameras are going to be exactly the same. So depending on what camera you're shooting on, it definitely makes sense to stick with the same brand of cameras if you're going for a secondary B camera, because that just means that the color science is going to be the same. It's going to handle very similarly to the camera that you already have as far as color science and file formats and codecs and stuff like that. So for me, the reason that I chose another GH3 was, one, GH3s are insanely cheap, and two, I've tried so many different cameras, and one thing that just slows me down is that when I'm shooting with another camera, it's using a different file format, the colors are different. It just slows me down enough to where, man, I just wish I had another GH3. This would make my life so much easier. And so now I do. And I feel like this mindset would make sense if you were shooting with a camera that maybe is pretty cheap nowadays too, like maybe you're still a G7 shooter or a GH4 shooter. It would probably make sense to just buy another camera body that's exactly the same as the one that you already have. And then you won't have to learn a new camera. You'll already know exactly what you can expect. And when you're going to a shoot, maybe for a corporate shoot or a wedding, you can set up both the cameras and know that you'll be able to match them very easily. So again, those are the reasons why I have a secondary camera now and why you might need one. But I just want to end out this video with saying you probably don't need one. And I went for years without actually owning another camera body, just using my iPhone to do some pickup shots and then renting cameras when I really needed them. So chances are you might not need another camera body, but if you did, it definitely makes sense to get a camera that's going to match with the camera that you currently have. And in my situation, getting the exact same camera that I currently have just made a lot of sense. Anyways, I hope you liked that video. If you did, it'd be really cool if you hit the like button, and be sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching. I'm gonna have videos and playlists that you can check out right here as well. Once again, thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you all next time. Later.